Hi guys, and welcome back to the channel. So this is part 2 of the Wowgo 2S mod, where we are going to be replacing the current ESC with two VESCs from Maytech, and hopefully get a huge performance boost because we can totally control these as we please. So first thing we want to do first is obviously remove power and to open up the ESC. Now the ESC bay is where the button is or by the motor. This works for a Meepo and an own board and all those Chinese boards. It all works the same. They're all using the same motor, just different casings sometimes. So what you want to do is you have 4 screws. You want to go ahead and pop those off. And then once you do, just slowly, it might be a little bit stuck in the beginning, but then once you remove it, everything's open. You'll find an Xt60 connected. That's coming from the battery. This is what's providing power here. So you want to just disconnect that just to be safe so you don't get shocked or, nothing bad happens in that perspective. So let's take a look in here real quick, because this is pretty interesting actually. I was expecting the ESC to be a lot larger, and I was also worried about that the VESCs won't fit because one VESC is a lot larger than the current dual ESC here for this board. So this is one ESC with 2 motor outputs. Now for our upgrade, we're going to need 2 separate VESCs and connecting them together with something called a Canbus connector, which is kind of like a JST connector. Now let's take a look here. So it doesn't have much caps on board, just has 2 fat Rubicon capacitors. So I'm guessing 1 for each motor, and it has 2 smaller ones here. And what this can say, if you ever notice, if you're riding your board on a bumpy road and your motors get hot, that could be due to noise from the ESC and the motors, and it's just not able to suck that up correctly, thus, introducing noise and making it do all kind of weird stuff. So that is a possibility why they tend to get hotter. However, with this one, we have 3 Rubicon low ESR capacitor for a much higher rated voltage, I believe. These are 50 volts, these are 63 volts, and these are 16,800 microfarad, 680 microfarad, and these are only 470 microfarad. So you got a ton more capacitance and a ton more filtration with just one single ESC than this whole thing is combined. And the way we're going to be posting it or placing it is just like so. It's going to fit just perfect. Both of them will fit together just fine. And then we're going to have to set up an Xt60 connector for the power there. You could use the existing one if you want, or you can pick some up. I'll leave a link to some of these down below if you don't know where to get them. So let's take a look in here. Now, when I was taking it off, I saw this wire. This is the antenna right here, as you can tell. So good thing I also purchased a spare remote, an extra remote with a receiver. So we're going to be able to control these, because obviously if you just take a look at this, there's no way we can access the ESC here. It's pretty much covered up. So we're not going to be able to use or utilize the current remote that comes with this board or any of the Chinese ones if they have the same concept. So now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and get a something just to tear up the heat shrinks here and remove the wires that we need. Now if you notice, each motor has 2 wires. We have the bullet connectors and we also have the sensor wire, because these are censored motors here. Let me just move that a little bit there. So these are censored motors, so you're going to need to connect them, and you do have a input for censored motors on this guy. Now I just need to double check, but we'll figure that out once we start cutting it up. So what we want to do now is we're not going to touch the power here, but we want to go ahead and just remove this one. This is for the power button. I don't know if we could utilize it for the ESCs, but we'll probably have to figure some kind of a different approach. And just something that I've also noticed on these Wowgo 2S boards, the gauge of the wire I would expect to be a slightly larger, but that's I guess you get what you pay for here. But overall, this board is beautiful. I have 2 of them, and I wanted to mod the first one that I got, and they're both running the same battery, the LG 6.4 amp batteries. So we're gonna be able to get a nice comparison between both of them, and they're only like a week between each other old, so they're both basically pretty much brand new, and I use them equally. Alright, so let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and start removing the heat shrinks right now, and then I'll come back and we'll see what's the next step and how to go ahead and proceed with this mod, if you might say. Alright guys, so I've actually removed everything, and I wanted to make a quick test to see if everything works before doing the second one together. So I did get it to work. However, I did notice a couple things. Now, first of all, obviously I removed the heat shrink, unplugged the bullet connectors from the motor, and forget this motor. And this is the sensor wire for the ESC. Now you can tell this is what I did here. This is just for testing purposes at the current moment of time. And you might say, well, why did you do that? Well, because unfortunately, the current connector, the sensor connector, does not fit on the ESC. And it does come with an adapter, but that adapter also does not fit for the current pin, or just the type of connector that these motors are using. But it's a super simple fix. If you flip this over, well, first let's start. This sensor, this motor here has 5 wires. The ESC takes 6 wires, so there's an extra wire that's missing, and you have to figure out which wire it is. But it turns out to be much simpler than it really was. So the sensor wire here, which obviously takes ground and 5 volt to power up the sensor and the motor, and then it has 3 wires for the Hall sensor, and it has 1 wire for temperature reading. These motors don't have temperature reading, so all we have to do is just make sure we get our ground and our power correct, and then the Hall effect sensors wires in the sensor part of the pinout. It doesn't matter the orientation, it'll work just fine. All you have to do is just be extra careful. The red wire is the 5 volt, the black wire is the ground, and then the other wires are the Hall sensors. Now, the way to do this, first, I didn't know that it even had it written on the back of these pins here. But first, what I did is I Googled online for the pinouts, and then it said, just gave you the order, but I didn't know which side is which. So I had to grab my multimeter, put it in beep mode or continuity mode. I still can't pronounce that word correctly. And just touch the ground, and then just touch these pins until it beeped. But there's really no need for that. Because if we remove it, let's take a look at this one here. So as you can tell here, how did I connect it? Well, actually, I just soldered it to the back. So let me just show you what I did here. I just add a little bit of solder on each of those pins. Let's just zoom in. Hopefully that'll zoom in beautifully. It's a little bit far from me, but that says ground, and then there's 5 volt, and you want to skip the wire or the pin out next to the 5 volt because that's the temperature reading. And then you want to just solder the other wires, and the black wire to ground, the red wire to 5 volt, and the other 3 wires. Doesn't matter the orientation. You could follow the same thing. However, it does not matter at all. So you don't have to worry about that. Just make sure you get your positive and your negative correct, which is the 5 volt and the ground. And just make sure you don't solder anything to the temperature pin out right there. So we're going to go ahead and do this one together. We're going to do the second one together. I just wanted to make a quick test run and make sure everything is working. And what I can tell you right off the bat was the motors spin a lot faster. I brought my second one today because I had it left in the house. So hopefully today we can finish this up. Now we will need to we're gonna need to cut wires, which was, I really wanted to avoid that at all costs, but there's no way in hell we could have avoided that, because this VESC's bullet connectors are much larger than the ones here, and I don't have any to fit in this, not even the regular ones that come with where you can just purchase, these type of bullet connectors. Even these are small. So what I have to do is, first I cut these wires out, but then I decided, not to, just solder the motors directly to the VESC here, as you can tell here. So I did cut the wires, but I did keep them a little bit long here, so in case if I ever wanted to return back the old ESC, it'll still function correctly. Now I did try to dig this out to see if I could pop this off and maybe it'll fit, but you can't, and I think I popped the capacitor off. I'm not sure here, so don't do that. Just remove it, put it off to the side. And this is how the antenna looks like. This will be pretty much stuck, and yeah, that's how it was. This is basically your antenna also, I think. Yeah, it's a PCB circuit. I kind of ripped this off. I yanked it. It's kind of like double-sided tape or something was stuck inside this. So when I was pulling it, what you do is wrap around first. Don't just pull direct. Wrap it around. Leave as small as an area possible after you wrap around, and then yank it out, or just cut that off and just yeah, and you're good to go. So I kind of fucked up in this perspective, but that's totally fine. I don't really care. I found the manufacturer, and I have a couple new things coming from them, so it's gonna be pretty cool. Not for free, obviously, but I really want to test their stuff. So anyways, now what we're gonna have to do next is obviously we're gonna have to remove the heat shrink here. And what you want to do is you want to be very careful, because anything could be conductive in here. It can just fry this right up and just catch your whole place on fire. So you got to be very careful. And so let's start one step at a time now. Let's move this ESC out of the way. So in theory, what we want to do is here's our battery connector right there. And I've made this Xt60 connector. This is where both ESCs would connect, and this would connect to the battery. So if you take a look at my current ESC here, I basically soldered an Xt60 connector right there. This is a male, I think, yeah, and this is the female. And then that would connect like this. The other one would connect here, and that would connect to the battery. However, I don't have any buttons to switch this on and off, so I'm gonna have to figure something out later on for that. But right now, well, many of you probably have seen how fast these motors spin up on your default settings. So actually, let me just set this up so you can get an idea of how insane just immediately you can tell. I mean, especially if you have your board, your previous boards, I'm pretty sure you just keep spinning the wheels every now and then, just take a look at them. I'm going to show you right now how much of a difference it is. It's going to be that wheel. And let's go ahead and take a look at it before we continue. Alright, so I've gone ahead and powered up the ESC here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn on my remote controller. I got this from Maytech also. And can you see that? Look. That is... I feel a little bit of a delay in the braking. It's noticeably quicker. Hold on, let's see change the mode. Yeah, there we go. So it's noticeably faster for me here in real life. I don't know how you guys are gonna see it on camera, but this just gave me a lot of hope. So this is gonna be pretty cool. All right, so let me prepare everything and let's get started on the second ESC and show you exactly how I'm gonna go ahead and do this. You can do the same aspect for both. And later on, I don't know if I'm gonna wrap both of them in just electrical tape to prevent any shorts at the current moment of time. And then later on, I'll 3D design and 3D print something to keep them secured into place. Once you disconnect the power, be careful still not to short anything, because the capacitors are still loaded with some electricity here. So just be extra careful not to touch anything. And yeah, just don't worry about it. Just try not to have it touch anything metal. So I've gone ahead and removed this. I'm going to prepare everything, and then we're going to go ahead and get started on preparing the second ESC. All right, so first things first, let's just go ahead and start preparing the ESC here. What we want to do is just completely prepare it so everything else will be a lot easier. So we're going to have to remove the heat shrink, unfortunately, and I'm very upset that I don't have large heat shrink. And be careful when you're doing this step. We're going to have to completely remove it because we need to access the other side of this connector. Now, I highly recommend you find the correct connector and then you just do that. But for me, to be honest, I just don't want to wait. I really don't want to wait. I just want to get started. And plus, it's a better connection once it's soldered. So you got to just be extra careful removing the heat shrink here. Okay, there we go. So there's a little trippy part in this. Hold on, let me just pop this open real quick. All right, the capacitors. Actually, I could have kept the capacitors last time. I don't know why I removed it, but yeah, there's no really need to remove. Well, yeah, you do because of the water. Oh no, you can't pull those out. So yeah, be careful. Check this out. I was like, wait, where are the capacitors connected? Can you see that? Where are they connected? That's so trippy. What they did is they split the wire and then they connect. It's so weird. I've never seen this before. I don't know how good it is to do it this way, but I could go ahead and start testing it on our drone setup. So check this out. It's right there. It's like cut and then it's soldered on. So just be very careful not to pop this off if they probably had a cold joint or something. It looks like a pretty good solder job. Well, that one looked better than this one, but that's totally fine. The overall board looks very good. So now we have this done. What do we need to do? We're going to need to remove these three right here. We're going to have to desolder these guys. And they're using a lead solder. So, around 350 degrees Celsius, you should pop that right off. And what I'm going to be using for the soldering is I do have a huge soldering station, but I'm going to be using this portable soldering iron with like a 12-volt battery connected to it. Power supply. And it comes with this tip. This is absolutely phenomenal. I've been using it nonstop now. It's portable too. You can put like a lipo in it and then take it everywhere. So let's go ahead and let me get the soldering iron to get started. All right, so as you can tell here, and it has different versions and stuff like burst mode and these kinds of cool things. It's very awesome. It's super cool. So let that heat up real quick. So what we want to do now is we want to remove these 3 wires. We want to desolder them. Okay, and before you do that, just make sure you're not going to go up here and touch any of these, because look, if you take a look at mine, always the one on the bottom, if you're looking at it the same way, is not soldered to the rest. So take that into consideration and be extra careful. Okay, same thing on the back side. So we want to remove these 3 wires, and then we want to bend this guy over here, and we want to add solder to the pins that we want, and these are the pins for the censored motor here, so they're very important. So let's go ahead and see if okay, the soldering iron is ready. And these will tend to heat up the board pretty dramatically, and what I recommend doing is that after you remove all 3, to go ahead and let it cool down for a bit. It doesn't hurt if you let it cool down for a bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this together. So here's a little bit of solder. This will allow the heat to transfer much better. Blow it, and then it'll allow it to heat up everything much quicker. So it takes a while, especially I'm not using my proper soldering iron, but you know, I'm pretty sure not a lot of people have a proper soldering iron, so, or a soldering station like I do. So that's why I decided to use this. Plus I really like using this. I want to get the hang of this one. All right, so we're getting there. We're eventually getting there. There we go. We got 1 wire out. I want to do the same for the others also. It should be a little bit easier since the board kind of heated up a little bit, but just patience and persistence, and you should just get it done. There we go. I can feel it. And when you're pulling the wire, pull it gently. Don't pull it like how I pulled it the first time, because solder could splatter over the board and you might not see where it splattered. And it could connect 2 things together, and once you plug it in, oh, it could just be an absolute nightmare. So be very cautious and very careful. So the wire is heating up pretty dramatically now. There we go. It's almost out. There we go. All right. So we have 1 more left. Let me just fix the orientation here. So the board's getting pretty toasty now. I can't even keep my hand on it. Well, yeah, I could still keep my hand. Make sure these components don't get too hot right here. The MOSFETs will get pretty toasty actually, so take that into consideration. And after this, just let it cool down for a little bit, because I think it's best to let it cool down for a bit. There we go. So the reason why I'm recording every little detailed step, so you can kind of get an idea of what I'm doing and the technique, especially if you're new to this. Oh my god, that wire is super hot. Okay, beautiful. So we got this out of the way. This is one of the hardest parts actually of this whole thing, depending on your soldering station. All right, so the board's still pretty toasty. Now what we want is this top connector here, because this is for the censored wires. So we're gonna need to find something to hold this back here and keep everything pretty steady. All right, there we go. So now we want to do is add solder to these, not all of them. So here's ground, and then after ground there's going to be the 3 wires for the Hall effect sensors in the motor, and then after those 3 it's going to be the temperature, and then the one all the way over there is the 5 volt. So we're just going to add some solder to this right now. Let's do that together. Okay, so right now, just a moment, because I actually disconnected my soldering iron. Alright, so let it just heat up a little bit. It was actually disconnected. Because the thing is, I can't see from this far, so I'm going to be quiet because I'm just going to come as close as possible. Alright, there we go. So it's heating up right now. There we go. Alright. Yeah, okay, perfect. So let's go ahead and hit the ground here. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Make sure you keep cleaning it, because you don't want to bridge anything, especially if you're not. There we go. Alright, so we added some solder. Now they're very nice and shiny, And this just gives us a little bit more surface area and just a better adhesion when we're going to do the wires for the censored part. So let's actually do that now. So what I did here, let's take a look here. I got these dew point connectors. Now you can cut this wire, the sensor wire from the motor, but I choose not to. I just had these laying around, and what I did is I cut them in half, and one I use on that side, and I just stick them into the hole of the connector here. So all we have to do is make sure we get the first two wires correct, which is the 5 volt and the ground. So I'm going to be using a black and a red wire for the 5 volt and the ground. So let's go ahead and I'm going to start by stripping these wires and preparing them real quick. Alright, so I've gone ahead and prepared the wires. Now what you want to do is once you strip them, you want to twist them and add solder to them. That's something very important to do. You must do that actually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the ground, which is the most bottom one right there. So let's go ahead and grab the ground. Now if you can tell here, it's pretty long, and you want it to be facing up because you don't want this to be going this way. You don't want it to accidentally get loose or touch any of these components, thus creating a huge problem, or a fire basically. That's the huge problem. So what I want to do is I want to trim some of this off real quick, and make sure you trim away from the board because sometimes these can just get stuck or wedged between components and also create a nightmare. So that's something we really don't want. So now what I want to do is I want to put it right next to the pin right there. And I'm going to come with the soldering iron and I'm just going to touch it together with the pin. So this is what I want to do. Okay. And let's see. Perfect. Look at that. That's very good. Perfect. All right. So the next wires are going to be the censored wires. So I'm just going to use different colors. So here's an orange one. It doesn't really matter. Just as like I said before, I just keep repeating myself because it's very important. Just make sure you get the ground and the 5 volt correct. And you don't want to put a Hall sensor on the, accidentally on the temperature pin out. But yeah, I don't think you'll do that. Just be careful. Okay, so we got another one in here. So like I'd highly recommend you go ahead and just get the proper connector, especially if you don't know how to solder. That'll make your life a lot easier. All right, so I trimmed the other censored wire now. Okay, perfect. Here's another one. And the wire's a little bit too long here. So let's go ahead and trim that off. Trim some of it off. Okay. And then after this wire, all we need to do is the ground. Okay, beautiful. And then last but not least, and I can't find where I put that wire. That's awesome. Where is it? Okay, so we need the red wire, which is the power. There it is. Okay, so last one now. So we're going to skip the one right over, and then we're going to have the 5 volt go in on that last one over there. So, and I'll show you up a close up in a bit. All right, so that's complete. Let's take a look here. So there we go. Okay, so as you can tell here, we have the black, which is ground, which is the one all the way on this side, and then we have these three for the sensors, and then that would be temperature, and then that's going to be the 5 volt. As you can see, the temperature, we put nothing there, and you should not put anything there. Just make sure you get your black wire and your red wire perfect, so you don't have any issues. And then I'd highly recommend once you do that to kind of put them into place here, and then maybe put some hot glue, or put, actually hot glue I think would melt if depending on how hot the ESC would get, but some tape so it just doesn't keep playing, and then to reduce the chance of them breaking off really. So you don't want it to keep playing back and forth. All right, so that part is done with now, and let's go ahead and start with the what should we do next? We're gonna leave the let's do the Xt60 connector now. So I'm gonna go ahead and just attach an Xt60 connector. I'm going to be using a male Xt60 connector. I'll leave a link to these down below. So all we gotta do is just put these in like so, and just solder them inside, and then some heat shrink, and we're good to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and get that out of the way, and then the next step is going to be us soldering the motor wires to this and connecting these to the sensor, and then we could just boot it up, and then hopefully connect the Canbus, and then have them both connect synchronously with both ESCs and both motors. So let me go ahead and prepare the Xt60 connector, and I'll be back and we'll take it from there. Alright guys, so now I do have my Xt60 connector set up here, and I'm also going to add tape around this just in case, as you could tell here, I just don't want that touching anything or just creating problems later on inside. Alright, so now what we want to do is I want to go ahead and add a little bit of extra solder to these pads here so we can solder up the motor wires. Alright, so let's go ahead and prepare this here like so. Alright, so what we want to do is we want to go ahead and just start heating this up real quick. Okay. You want to keep heating it up until it touches the bottom pad. You want to feel that you touch the PCB here. Okay. Because then that way, there we go. Now it's proper. Now I'm touching the bottom pad here. Okay. I also want to add a little bit of solder here. The board is starting to get kind of toasty. There we go. Alright, now I'm touching the pad. Beautiful. And last but not least, so I have mine set to 400 degrees Celsius, my current soldering iron. You want to kind of max it out here depending on what kind of soldering iron you have. There we go. So that's very nice. Now the scary part, which is cutting up your bullet connectors off your motor wires while the ESC cools down a bit. So let's go ahead and zoom out here, and let's just go like this. So here's our sensor wires. We're going to move this to the side. So yeah, I basically cut them right there. So that's what we're going to do now. They're pretty thick, like wires. There we go. Done. It's kind of painful the first time you do it, but then, you know, this is the second time. It's going to just be a little bit better. All right, and just strip them. Okay. All right. And all right. If that happened to you, you want to remove that, because that'll cause contamination inside with the solder. There we go. If you can twist them, try to twist them, but they're pretty stiff already. So let's just add some solder to these to get it to transfer the heat a lot better, and at the same time get a proper solder job done here. Okay, so I'm trying to get that to focus right. All right, so these they're pretty thick, these wires, and sometimes they take a while to heat up, but yeah, they're heating up just fine here. So make sure nothing is under this while you're soldering, so you don't get any splatter anywhere where you don't want it to. For example, the ESC. So let's just wait for this one. There we go. All right, that's so satisfying to watch. Beautiful. Okay, so those are good. Now you might say, well, how the hell are you gonna know which one is which? Well, it doesn't really matter. Just put it in. We could always inverse the motor later on. So as you can tell here, my yellow one's a little bit too big. I want to trim that down a little bit. I don't want it that big because I don't want it risk going anywhere extra. There we go. It's beautiful. And make sure to, you know, do this quite often so you don't get anything in there that could cause a short circuit. So as you can tell, I have some, well, those are just scratches. All right, so let's go ahead and install this. So I don't know how I'm gonna install it just yet. Let me just figure this one out first. Okay. Because they're pretty stiff. The motor wires are pretty darn stiff, which is nice to see. I mean, I'm not worried about breaking them, but you know, I want to see how we're gonna install this. Probably this one here, and this one will probably be to the other way. Or yeah, I think that's how we're gonna do it. We'll figure it out. Okay. So let's remove this ESC. That's complete. And let's start with this one. Let's just start installing this. All right. So what we want to do is we want to install that there. All right. So just line it up, as you can tell right there. Okay, that green one. And then we're just going to apply heat until it just sinks right in. Okay, there we go. It can take some time to get it in, depending on your soldering station. So what I'm going to use, I'm going to use some tweezers here. And we're just going to hit it again. Okay. It's pretty toasty. Okay, so that's nice. I'm going to keep pressure with the soldering iron, and I'm just going to go ahead and grab some more solder here. That could just make the heat transfer a lot better, and make sure it goes down to the pad. There we go. Now that was nice. And you just hold it for a little bit until you make sure it cools down, so you don't get a cold joint, because you don't want it to move after you solder that into place. So we got one in now. All right, now we want to get the other one, which is going to be like this. There we go. Okay. And we want to make sure that it's not going to go anywhere. Okay. So same thing. We're going to go ahead, apply pressure, and keep the pressure with the soldering iron while grabbing the solder with my other hand. Okay, I believe that's going to be a good bond. Alright, so we got two in, and I'm going to go ahead and skip over the last one, and we'll come back and take a look at us connecting the sensors here. Alright guys, so now what we need to do is, since we've prepared the Xt60 connector and everything, I've gone ahead and connected the Canbus wire, which allows these two to communicate together. Now what we need to do is connect the Hall sensor wires. So what you want to do is you want to find the black wire on the motor sensor, and then get the black wire or ground, whatever you solder to ground on the sensor part. So here's ground. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick it in. There we go. Black to black. And now I need to find red and just avoid red. And then I'm just going to connect any other color just from the Hall sensors. It doesn't really matter. It all works perfect. There we go. And then there we go. And then there we go. And then now the red wire, which is very important, which will be the top. It's on the other end of the connector. So there we go. That's perfect. And I'm gonna keep them like this because I don't want to cut them and solder them directly for right now, just for testing purposes. I've gone ahead and configured it. We're gonna do the configuration in another video, but let's go ahead and test this. So I don't know, maybe because I switched up the Hall sensors now, I might have to recalibrate this one, and we'll see how well that turns out. So let's go ahead and connect them. I have my receiver connected to the master here. All it is, it comes with the remote. All you gotta do is just connect this just like that, and you're good to go. So it's very nice. Is this correct orientation? Yeah, there we go. All right, that's it. It's just very awesome, simple. I'll show you all that later on. So I'm just gonna go ahead and connect my USB here to this one. I might need to recalibrate it depending. So let's go ahead and grab our Xt60 connector that we made. Where is it? There it is. Okay, so you can tell here it has all females. So we're gonna get one ESC, we're gonna connect it. I'm gonna grab the other ESC, I'm gonna connect it. Okay, make sure nothing is touching. And I'm gonna go ahead and connect to the battery. So if you did everything right, there should be no fire, just a little spark. And that's in. And I just heard it initialize on the PC. So let's go ahead and check out the motors here. So everything's connected. Okay, so something is not right here. Yeah, I think I have to reconnect the Hall sensor right now. Just give me a moment. Or I have to reconfigure it real quick. We're gonna do the configuration in a separate video. So we're gonna go ahead and connect here, and we're gonna run the test. So we're gonna go ahead and reconfigure the motor. It's very simple. Actually, they made it very, very simple. So just BLDC, yes. Okay, the current, we're just gonna keep it default. Change it to 10S because I'm using a 10 volt 10S LiPo, not LiPo, lithium ion Hall sensor. There we go. Next, play. Okay. Perfect. Apply the configuration. Next, finish. Yep, there we go. Beautiful. Can you see that? That's just immediate. There's a little delay, but maybe we could figure out why. Oh, I think I know why. So I'm gonna go ahead and just wrap these all up with tape, stick them in as a prototype. Later on we'll make something super nice for it. In the second video I'm gonna go ahead and go over all of the configurations, and yeah, it's really that simple. I mean, it looks a little bit chaotic, but it's pretty simple and straightforward. So now I have to figure out a way to make them not conduct and just have a little cushiony inside, so they don't just keep smacking against the metal every time I hit a bump or something. So I'm gonna get that started with right now, and we'll come back and do the configuration, and then we'll probably 3D print something nice holder for inside the ESC case here. So that's gonna conclude it for this video, guys. I really hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you guys have any questions or any suggestions, feel free to let me know, and I will see you next time. See you guys. Take care.